special joint meeting today of the Public Works Committees and joint budget. Mr. Shai, please call a roll.
Roll call. Councilmember Brissett, present. Councilmember Jeruso.
Hang on a second. Here.
Councilmember Moreno. Councilmember Glapion. Councilmember Banks.
Here.
Councilmember Gissler and Palmer. Councilmember Nguyen.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Shai. Mr. Shai will read the agenda in its entirety. Afterwards, we will take a 10-minute recess to receive public comment. To submit a public comment, please visit council.nola.gov. Public comments are limited to 2 minutes. Read out loud in a normal speaking voice. Comments must be germane to the agenda. Mr. Shai will read the comments for each item at the end of each presentation. Mr. Shai, will you please read the agenda?
The agenda for the Joint Budget Audit Board of Review Public Works Committee meeting for Thursday, May 13th, 2021 at 10:30 a.m. Item number 1, roll call. Item number 2, approval of the minutes from the April 14th, 2021 meeting. Item number 3, presentation update on the status of the National Disaster Resilience NDR funded projects. Update on the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, HMGP, Green Infrastructure Projects, and update on the Joint Infrastructure Recovery Request, JIRR, scope overlay adjacent to the NDR and HMGP projects. To present, Ramsey J. Green, Deputy CAO of Infrastructure and Chief Resilience Officer. Item number 4, presentation and discussion of the scope, limitations, and/or restrictions of current and future infrastructure funds available to the City of New Orleans under the American Rescue Plan, JIRR, proposed federal infrastructure bill, existing city bonds, the $500 million of bonds approved by voters in 2019, and any funds that will become available following potential 2022 debt reduction, and how those resources can be used in concert to maximize positive impact on the city and for the residents. To present, CAO Gilbert Montano and Norman White, CFO. Item number 5, that's ordinance calendar number 33296, introduced on 4/22/2021 by Councilmember Brissett by request. This ordinance amends ordinance number 28551 MCS as amended, entitled An Ordinance Providing an Operating Budget of Expenditures for the City of New Orleans for the year 2021, to transfer funds from the French Quarter Improvement Fund to the Department of Police to fund a sergeant position and purchase vehicles to expand patrols within the Department of Police 8th District, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item number 6, ordinance calendar number 33297, introduced on 4/22/2021 by Councilmember Brissett by request. This ordinance amends ordinance number 28551 MCS as amended, entitled An Ordinance Providing an Operating Budget of Expenditures for the City of New Orleans for the year 2021, to transfer funds from the Chief Administrative Office and Miscellaneous Programs General Fund to the Mayor's Office of Youth and Families to fund 100 seats to the New Orleans City Seats Program, which provides high-quality child care to low-income families with children ages 0 to 2 years, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item number 7, ordinance calendar numbers 33307 and 33308, introduced on 5/6/2021 by Councilmember Brissett by request. These ordinances amend ordinances number 28550 MCS and number 28551 MCS as amended, entitled An Ordinance Providing an Operating Budget of Expenditures, budget of Revenues and Expenditures for the City of New Orleans for the year 2021, to appropriate state grant funds awarded by the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement to the New Orleans Police Department's Crime Lab to purchase protective/preventative supplies for the crime lab personnel, which will protect them while working on crime scenes and with regards to COVID-19 pandemic environments, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item number 8, ordinance calendar numbers 33309 and 33310, introduced 5/6/2021 by Councilmember Brissette by request. These ordinances amend ordinances number 28550 MCS and 28551 MCS as amended, entitled an ordinance providing an operating budget of revenues and expenditures for the city of New Orleans for the year 2021, to appropriate state grant funds awarded by the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement to the New Orleans Police Department to utilize officer overtime to assist police with conducting increased sex offender compliance checks and track the number of domestic violence follow-up investigations, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item number 9, ordinance calendar numbers 33311 and 33312, introduced on 5/6/2021 by Councilmember Brissette by request. These ordinances amend ordinances number 28550 MCS and number 28551 MCS as amended, entitled an ordinance providing an operating budget of revenues and expenditures for the city of New Orleans for the year 2021, to appropriate the balance of FY 2018 Family Recovery Collaborative Grant Funds awarded from the Department of Justice to the Department of Health to assist mothers in the New Orleans area with opioid addiction, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item number 10, ordinance calendar numbers 33313 and 33314, introduced on 5/6/2021 by Councilmember Brissette by request. These ordinances amend ordinances number 28550 MCS and number 28551 MCS as amended, entitled an ordinance providing an operating budget of revenues and expenditures for the city of New Orleans for the year 2021, to appropriate American Rescue Act grant funds awarded by the Federal Department of Health and Human Services to the New Orleans Health Department to promote, distribute, administer, and track COVID-19 vaccines. These funds will assist with planning, preparing, and executing other vaccine-related activities necessary to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item number 11, ordinance calendar numbers 33315 and 33316, introduced on 5/6/2021 by Councilmember Brissette by request. These ordinances amend ordinances number 28550 MCS and number 28551 MCS as amended, entitled an ordinance providing an operating budget of revenues and expenditures for the city of New Orleans for the year 2021, to appropriate state grant funds to the Office of Homeland Security from the FY 2020 State Homeland Security Program for training and equipment for public safety personnel in relation to disasters and emergencies, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item number 12, ordinance calendar numbers 33317 and 33318, introduced on 5/6/2021 by Councilmember Brissette by request. These ordinances amend ordinances number 28550 MCS and number 28551 MCS as amended, entitled an ordinance providing an operating budget of revenues and expenditures for the city of New Orleans for the year 2021, to transfer funds from the Economic Development Fund to the Mayor's Office of Economic Development to support the city's economic development initiatives, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item number 13, ordinance calendar number 33319, introduced on 5/6/2021 by Councilmember Brissette by request. This ordinance amends ordinance number 28549 MCS, entitled an ordinance providing a capital budget for the year 2021, to effect the following changes to the 2021 capital budget: to appropriate funds to the Department of Public Works and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item number 14, budget reports, CAO Finance. Item A, personnel spending forecast. Item B, revenue collections report. Item C, operating expenses, available balances by department. Item D, status of current workforce. Item number 15, other matters. And item number 16, adjournment. That is the agenda.
Councilmember, you're on mute.
Oh,
You're on
thank
mute.
you. Thank you. Forgot this is, after this button twice. Thank you, Mr. Shy. With that, we will now take a 10-minute break for public comments. It is now 10:51. We will return at 11:01. See you back then. Thank you. Thank you, and welcome back to the Joint Budget and Public Works Committee meeting. That concludes our 10-minute break for public comments. We will now go to the first agenda item. Mr. Yubi, number 2.
Item number 2, approval of the minutes from the April 14, 2021 meeting.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Wynn, seconded by Councilmember Jeruso. All in favor?
Aye.
Yay. 4 yeas, no nays, and the minutes are approved. Next agenda item. Number 3, we have the presentation. Update status of the National Disaster Resilience, NDR funded projects, update on the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, green infrastructure projects, an update on joint infrastructure recovery requests, scope overlay adjacent to the National Disaster Resilience and Hazard Mitigation projects. To present Ramsey Green, Deputy CEO for infrastructure. Just a few comments. I would like to say that New Orleans is at a turning point. Climate change, of course, we all know is real, and its implications for New Orleans can be seen almost daily. From increased rains and intense thunderstorms to extremely active hurricane seasons, New Orleans must prepare and realize this new reality. Our future depends on our ability to invest in large-scale sustainability and resiliency projects that address flooding risks head-on. This is why I am so excited about the work of the Pontilly Resilience District. This district is funded through a $141 million grant from the United States Department on Housing and Urban Development from the National Disaster Resilience competition. The NDRC competition was created in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, which we all know hit upstate New York. The district is composed of 9 projects across the Pontilly area and are aimed at reducing flood risk, slowing land subsidence, improve energy reliability, and encourage neighborhood revitalization. The Pontilly Resilience District builds on existing investments in urban water management, funded through the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and the ability to combine the funding from both HUD and FEMA provides the city with a unique once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The hazard mitigation projects includes 8 projects located throughout the city, from Pontilly to Faubourg St. Roch, Broadmoor, Lakeview to Pontchartrain Park. In addition to both Pontilly Resilience District and the FEMA hazard mitigation projects, there is also road work in and around these projects through the Joint Infrastructure Recovery Request, or JIRR. It's $2 billion investment in road and utility infrastructure. Many of these funding sources have timelines for when the money must be spent. We have the entire city awash in construction projects. And as budget chair, I wanted to make sure that we are on target for meeting these deadlines. We can't let this opportunity to slip through our fingers. We need to be proactive and ensure that we are using all of our available funding to its best use and highest use I've invited Ramsey Green, Deputy CAO of Infrastructure and the city's Chief Resilience Officer, here today to provide us with a comprehensive update on all of these various infrastructure and resiliency projects. I would also invite Chairman Geruso to join me in introductory remarks. Chairman Geruso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you said a lot of it, obviously, particularly with what happened the last few days. I think we all understand the importance of living with water and welcome what's going on, not only in Gentilly and the Mirabu project. Ramsey, I think you may know, I got contacted about City Park the other day where people are starting to inquire about the retention of 47 million gallons there as well. And so I think there's a lot of good things that we are doing. We know the status of the gray infrastructure and that it's old and reaching or has reached its obsolete point. And so it's incredibly important that we use our money the right way to support not only improving that, but also using the green infrastructure as well. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the introduction. I look forward to Ramsey et al. Making this presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Geruso. Ramsey.
All right. Hi. Thank you so much, Councilman Brissett. Thank you, Councilman Geruso. Can you all hear me okay? Just want to make sure. All right. If I can, we've got a lot of team here for you. You're mostly, I'm going to do most of the introduction and be here for the most of the presentation. You're going to hear from Mr. Joe Threat, runs PDU, including all the green infrastructure projects. Miss Mary Kincaid runs the NDR projects and a good chunk of the HMGP ones. Seth Knudsen and Brenda Bro from NORA, who run the Community Adaptation Program, which is funded by NDR. Kim DeLarge, our Capital Budget Director, and Sarah McLaughlin-Porteous, who handles all of our external relations. So we're all, and excuse me, I'm sorry, Gray Lewis from Sewage and Water Board is also here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think we have a really good story to tell you. If I can, I just want to start off by saying, you know, we had a tornado yesterday, which is a fairly unusual thing in New Orleans, though it seems a little bit more of a regular occurrence at times. And I just want to say our infrastructure folks, I feel like, did a pretty darn good job getting, responding, cleaning up, and being on the ground very early yesterday morning and into the night last night. And council members, thank you so much for giving us tips on what your residents are hearing so we can go out there and respond. But I do really want to thank Parks and Parkways, DPW, and sanitation in particular, because yesterday was a very tricky day. Councilman Brissett, I just want to back up a little bit of what you said with some data that I think is very timely and important. Looking at rainfall totals since 1980, in New Orleans, April of 2021 was the fifth wettest April since 1980. Fifth wettest April, we had 12.85, almost 13 inches of rain. The mean is 5.5 inches of rain. May is a little more startling. May of this year is now the third wettest May New Orleans has had in the last 40 years, and it's only May 12th. I'm going to say that again because it's such a big deal. May of this year is the third wettest May since 1980, and we're only at May 12th. We've already had 11.13 inches of rain this month, and our mean is 5.1 inches. So you guys are as invested in getting these projects done efficiently and effectively as we are. And I think we have a pretty exciting story to tell you. So Paul, if you can just go to this first slide, I'm going to do the quick intro, and then I'm going to turn it over to Joe and Mary to get more into the details. Councilman Brissett, you're very familiar with the Pontilly Stormwater Management Project. That quote on the top from Gretchen Bradford from Pontchartrain Park was courtesy, and we should have cited it, and I will now. That was from an interview she gave to Gentilly Messenger, the website, and she's seeing it make a big difference in their neighborhood. And Megan Williams from DPW managed that project. All of our team really got that thing approved by FEMA, constructed, and it's highly complex, and it holds 8 million gallons of water right off the neighborhood of Pontchartrain Park and Gentilly Woods. And then we had a resident adjacent to the Hagen Lafitte drainage project, which we're about 98% construction on, saying that he or she, I don't know whether that's a male or female, that was done through a survey, is seeing dramatic flood reduction in the mid-city area. We've completed 15.5 million. The Pontilly project, we're wrapping up Hagen Lafitte, which is 7.1, adds another 1 million gallons of storage. We're kicking off construction on $87 million worth of FEMA HMGP project. This is in 2021. These are going into construction when the Cantrell administration came in. Much of these projects had sat sort of in the paper approval file and hadn't even started design. We started design and we're starting construction this year. We're kicking off construction on another 100 million in the GRD right in your district, Councilmember said, and we're really excited about that. And finally, we've got the $5 million. We're isolating down the scope right now for the DDD to do pervious parking lanes, some bioswale work, and some really good holding of water. You know, we're seeing all this rain, but we are not seeing the standing floods that we had seen, I think, a few years ago. And I think that that's in part the real impact of some of this work that we're doing. I'm going to turn it over to Joe Threat right now to go over these projects as we move forward, and I'll remain if y'all have questions for me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ramsey. Good morning, council members. A pleasure for us to be here. Since we came in 2018, starting these federal grant programs, we've done a lot of work. And like I told Ramsey, I think when we first came on board, that, you know, progress is painful. And as you know, right now, we've probably got about 76 JIR projects in construction. We're still working the max pay. When you talk about timelines, Councilmember Brissett, on the federal guidelines, on the NDR, as you know, we got an extension as a result of the pandemic to 2023 to finish those projects. But we're still on our project schedules for completion of 2022 for those projects. And that additional time that we got from the federal government, from HUD, that additional year extension will just be gravy with us. So I'm not worried about finishing up the NDR projects. When we talk about HMGP, we've got a hard date of 2022. Mary will talk about that as far as a period of performance of completion. With the JIRR projects, our target to be complete is 2023 on that $2 billion single settlement for the city and for Sewer and Water Board, our partner. We are looking to have all our NTPs for construction by December of 2022, so we can meet that deadline for 2023. That 2023 deadline, not only is it a hard stop for us on JIRR, but also all of our Katrina related projects that we have for vertical construction. With that, I've got Mary Kincaid that's going to brief the NDR project along with Brenda Bro and her team. Mary is our program manager, project manager for both the hazard mitigation program with FEMA and also the HUD National Disaster Resilience Program work in our green infrastructure. Mary's the senior civil engineer with the city as far as road and street construction and green infrastructure. So with that, Mary, if you could walk the council members through the slides. Mary, are you on mute?
Hey, Joe, thank you for that. As you said, we have had a lot of good progress in the last year. If we can go to the next slide. So highlights on some of our hazard mitigation programs. We do have advertisements coming out for District D Marabou. We also have the District C St. Roch project, which has close to 1 million gallons of storage, and then another project in District D of Oak Park.
Kincaid, when are those advertisements coming out?
So we anticipate that within the next 4 weeks. So some of those are possibly in the next 2 weeks, but definitely by 4 weeks, these will all be advertised.
So in the next 4 weeks, you said Miraboo Project and St. Rock will be advertised in Oak Park.
And Oak Park, yes. Excitingly, we have final design on our Broadmoor project, which has 13 million gallons of storage, very comprehensive across the Uptown neighborhood all the way to Hoffman Triangle. So we're anticipating to receive final environmental approval on Broadmoor soon from FEMA and be able to put that out. You may be aware of some of the remediation activities that the city had to do in advance of that project. So Saratoga Park, which was a former incinerator, is now completely remediated and is ready to go as soon as we receive the environmental approval to start that.
Right.
And we'll have a whole slide on this.
I'm glad to hear that with Saratoga, as that entire site has been remediated. I'm sure Councilmember Banks is appreciative as well.
It's very exciting. You know, a bit of a setback for us that FEMA would not fund the remediation, but since we weren't waiting on their funding, that, you know, we went ahead and started the remediation so that when we do get the funding from them for the project, we can just go right into construction. And we're going to have a whole slide on City Park, which is currently under design. Next slide. So Pontilly Stormwater Network, we did recently have the ribbon cutting for this. It was managed by Megan Williams out of DPW. And this is a great example of how flexible these green infrastructure techniques are. You can see that this had pervious pavement, pervious parking lanes, all the way up to stormwater lots, stormwater parks, and a very large bioswale in Joe Bart Golf Course. This is a great project for the council. If residents have questions about what does this look like, how is it going to work, you can encourage them to go out and check out the bioswale that's at Press Street and Joe Bartholomew Golf Course, and they can kind of see how these things are going to look once it comes into their neighborhood. And then we'll be talking a little bit more about how the work that we're going to do under NDR at Dwyer Canal is going to tie this whole thing together. Next slide. Megan Lafitte, we've got some pictures here of the green infrastructure improvements that went on around the park. The story itself is the underground storage underneath the park. So there's underground storage underneath Easton Park. We were able to restore that park. This was managed by Marlon Carrio and DPW. We were able to do a project that both stores water and then also put it back into a recreational asset. So the storage has been added. The park is in the process of being reopened, but the park will be able to go on and be used as before. You wouldn't even know that the main stormwater element is there. Next slide. So Lakeview City Park, this is one of our projects that's a little still in design as compared to the things that are ready to go out to bid or in construction. We had a project called Lakeview that had green alleys in Lakeview, and we requested with FEMA to amend this. So we were able to amend this project and create a new project, Lakeview City Park, under the Cantrell administration. So this is $18 million. What we're going to be doing is restoring the lagoons in City Park to the original design. Some of those connections had been silted up, or the culverts themselves connecting the lagoons, you know, they were under design. So we're really restoring the lagoons in City Park to the original design. And we're taking water that currently leaves Lake Vista and goes into a culvert under Robert E. Lee into the pump station. We're going to route it through City Park. And what that fresh water is going to do, it's going to help City Park with the water quality in the lagoons and help with fishing habitat. So this is really a win-win, that this gives us an opportunity to not just relieve flooding in Lakeview, by as much as 12 inches during a 100-year event. This also relieves flooding in City Park. You know, City Park is completely self-funded, so the current drainage problems where the golf course has to be closed for longer periods of time due to standing water, this will alleviate that and help them to also be more self-sufficient. It's a great opportunity for us to address some long-term issues that we knew we had with the drainage system, such as the condition of the culverts that are north and south along I-10.
Mary, wouldn't this also alleviate the flooding in the areas around Delgado in the Navarre neighborhood that is roughly behind City Park? So below the neighborhood below this area.
Yeah, you know, going into that neighborhood, you know, kind of around Orleans, what we've seen from these projects time and again is that once we provide relief on the pump station at one point, that because these pump stations are all connected, because the system is all interconnected, you know, we see that there's going to be flooding reduction in that neighborhood, kind of north and south of Orleans, right there at Carrollton, and then also around Delgado. You know, the major effects that we're looking at are in Lakeview, and then of course we're tracking whether we're going to be adding water or reducing water in City Park, because they're a very important partner for us. But absolutely, there are systemic benefits much further away than Lakeview. Any other questions on City Park?
Okay.
Okay, next slide. So our hazard mitigation project really set the table for what we're doing with the Pontilly Resilience District. We had taken this green infrastructure approach with hazard mitigation, you know, well before FEMA adopted it as their major way of funding, what they call nature-based solutions. So recently, when they reauthorized the Stafford Act, they went to non-disaster hazard mitigation, and they really have an emphasis on nature-based solutions and put a white paper out on what they want to see cities making applications. Fortunately, we had already kind of taken this approach with our past hazard mitigation projects. That allowed us to be competitive in getting this funding and implementing this approach on the Pontilly Resilience District. As Joe mentioned, we do have a period of performance extension on this through August 31st of 2023. We do have Seth and Brenda on the phone with us. They recently did their 100th property. All of those properties are adaptations for low to moderate income homeowners, so we're really excited about the change that we're seeing from that. And we now have more than $84 million of this in design to total 13 million gallons of stormwater storage. And we do expect that we're going to move some dirt this year. We're really excited to move some dirt, because once we move some dirt, that means that in the future we'll be moving some water and storing some water. And we do have other partners. So we're really lucky that we have a very robust team, whether it's the Deltaris Institute out of the Netherlands, Tulane, the Trust for Public Land, and the University of New Orleans. We have $6 million in planning money that allowed us to help them answer some questions. You know, would these types of projects lead to more mosquitoes or less mosquitoes? You know, how much are we going to be able to reduce repetitive flooding? And then Deltaris is looking at the relationship between groundwater, subsidence, and the freshwater balance. So the relationship between the water that's stored in the soil and the flooding that we have. Now, we periodically go out and update the public, including contractors and including potential workers, through our quarterly infrastructure industry days. And we're working extremely closely with the Office of Workforce Development and Sine Villavaso to make sure that we're providing them, you know, these are the types of opportunities that are going to be created by this work, the types of workers that we're going to be looking for. And we're also coordinating with the JP Morgan Chase money that looks at that. as well. Next
Hey,
slide.
Mary, this is Joe. Can you brief the council members on how we went back and debundled some of these big contracts we had to provide opportunities for our small business and DBE community?
Yes, thank you, Joe. And we've also identified on the specific projects, where we're debundling them. So debundling is what we're calling, when we have something like a $25 million project, and we know that anything above the $5 million bonding threshold can be hard for smaller contractors. And we do have a program, Build NOLA, that helps contractors go from the $5 million to the $10 million threshold. So by debundling, we're looking at taking a $25 million project and breaking it down into, say, a $5 million, a $10 million, and a $10 million project, so that we're letting those out as 3 separate construction projects, which allows our small and local contractors to more directly be involved, as opposed to having to go through a very large prime. We're also really excited to see the variety in bid responses that we hope that this approach will get us. So you'll see when we talk about 3 timelines or just to be constructed in more than one portion, that's what we're talking about with debundling. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah,
Next slide.
about how much of our funding has been debundled to benefit our small disadvantaged businesses?
So we've currently debundled St. Anthony Green Street, Blue and Green corridors, and we will debundle St. Bernard Neighborhood Campus as soon as we receive HUD approval for our amendment to our substantial amendment to the action plan. So altogether, that's close to $100 million. I'd be happy to get you the exact number and send it to your office.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, please.
Yeah.
That subject though, I appreciate it's 100 million, but what has the response been? Have you been getting participation from smaller contractors trying to take advantage of this?
Councilmember Banks, I won't know that till this fall. We certainly have had interest, and we had interest back from the smaller contractors that they would actually like to see the plans or at least be alerted of the plans at the 90% level, rather than, having only time to put out a bid in the time frame that we put out. Once we bid something, they're saying that's really not enough time for us. So when we took advantage of an existing meeting that we were doing, and 90% we present progress to what's called the Resilience Design Review Committee, and that's a public meeting. So at 90%, we share those meeting details with supplier diversity, and they push that out to their network. And we are seeing increased contractor participation in those meetings. They are tuning in to kind of get a heads up of when this is coming out. So we know that they're interested, but in terms of the actual effect, I won't really know until we have some of these things go into construction this fall.
And and forgive my naivety, but when is that going to be? When can we look to actually see the success? Is it in the August? Is it December? When can we actually look to know how we're doing with this?
Some of it will be in the third quarter. I believe we have more in the fourth quarter, but definitely by October, we'll know.
Okay. Thank you.
And Councilmember Banks, what we'll do is, I'll take a note that we continue briefing out on the progress of our small companies. We've got another industry day coming up in June. We're also debundling on the JIRR program. And we had also put out our new A&E pool that's on the street right now, and debundled that by discipline, so a lot of those other small companies can get involved in the design projects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Banks. You proceed, Ms. Kincaid.
Thank you, Councilmember Brissett. Just as a reminder, we do have Brenda Bro and Seth Knutson with us. for any questions about CAP. CAP, as you can see from this photo, is really making people happy. It's a $5.9 million program. We're hoping to take the number of total participants up to 200. Currently, our target is 140, but Brenda and I are working closely that if we have any money on some of the construction projects where things come under bid or where we don't use all of our contingency, we're not going to leave that on the table. We're not going to return it to HUD. You know, we will move forward with another amendment to the action plan to make sure that that money gets spent. NORA has done extremely well with this program. They're actually up to 300,000 gallons of stormwater stored. And we've got 106 projects completed. This is a photo of the 100th. And then I have to compliment NORA that, you know, they did go through a process of having to replace some of the subcontractors that were working on this. And, you know, they were able to handle that really timely and, you know, remain on track. Next slide. So when we talk about CAP, what does that really mean? So CAP is taking, Community Adaptation Program is taking some of these same techniques that you see us talking about in our public spaces and putting them into the private space. So NORA qualifies the applicants as meeting the criteria of the program, and they can select the design element that they like. They can select the contractor. They can interview the contractor. The contractors and designers have been pre-qualified by NORA. It's a great program. It did win the EPA Regional Award for Green Infrastructure last year. And we are working with other entities to show this as a project that's a model for how you include people, you know, by giving the residents a choice of, you know, building that relationships themselves. And then rather than directly granting the money to the homeowners, although the homeowner chooses the design team and chooses the contractor, NORA pays the invoices. So it's a really well-designed program. But you can see here what we're talking about. This is where a impermeable driveway has been replaced with Belgian block with aggregate gravel around it. So it's a fully permeable driveway. Next slide. And then some of the other things that we've done, you can see here in the foreground of the house, installing rain gardens with native plants, installing the type of plants that have longer tap roots and will store water longer. The other thing that this project does is reduces the heat profile, which we know is a big public health concern. Now, it's a big public health issue in New Orleans. It's only going to get worse in the face of climate change. So things that we can do, like removing these hard impervious surfaces and then adding more greenery that kind of buffers that heat absorption during the day, is also really beneficial for public health. Any questions?
I would ask how many applications are left. I see it says a benefit up to 200 low to moderate income families, households could benefit through having this adaptation program incorporated into their homes. Ms. Bro, are there opportunities for families to continue to apply? Has the money been exhausted? How much funding is left?
Thank you, Council Member, and thank you to the city for allowing NORA the opportunity to serve as the implementer of this program. We went through a robust application process. As you recall, we got lots of interest based on the funding that we have and the applications that have been approved to date. We have only about 8 available slots. Although we're under our current agreement with the city, we service up to 140 based on the numbers and what we have. We will, at the end of the day, at the end of this program, service about up to 195 program participants. Again, based on the applications we've got, documentation that has been reviewed and received, we only have 8 available openings.
Repeat the openings again?
Only 8.
Okay.
Yes, that's all we have. what
And
we,
give their contact information where people can contact Nora.
yes, they can reach us at 658-4400. NORAredevelopment.org. We're open, and our office is open, and contact us as they might have a need or desire. One of the things I'd like to comment to everyone that might be watching is that what we've noticed is that several of our former applicants, either who didn't meet the income eligibility, but because of the pandemic and things that has taken place financially over the course of the past year, have come back to us and have resubmitted applications. So we have been doing that and adding those individuals. But again, we only have eight openings as of today. And I'd like to chime in to both Joe and to Mary and to thank them also for their support of this program. But more importantly, we're looking for the opportunity of expanding this program, and whatever opportunities might exist for the citizens in Gentilly. There's an appetite for this program and interest in this program, and the education that takes place in addition to the stormwater mitigation interventions that are put in place can be seen throughout of the various neighborhoods in the program. And we have more detailed information. Council member, if you'd like to see a number of participants by neighborhoods, we can provide that to you as well.
Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary, you can have it.
Thank you, Brenda. Councilmember Set, one of the things that we like to say in the PDU unit is, we're always applying for new grants, just like always be selling, but in the PDU, it's always be applying for new grants. We really like the model for this, and so we're already talking that this fall we would like to put a application for non-disaster hazard mitigation to take this program citywide, both from the interest and really especially looking at that relationship between urban heat and those areas that are low to moderate income. So the information that's come out that the areas that have the highest heat risk and have the least amount of trees and green space line up with low to moderate income areas, we feel that expansion of this program under the hazard mitigation program would allow us to address those inequities across the city and not just in Gentilly. So just FYI, we are looking to expand this in the future, and hopefully that will be successful, but we'll make that application this fall, and we won't know until spring of next year. Next slide. And here we see rain barrel. Next slide. So talking a little bit about, going back to your earlier question about, how are we debundling these? So St. Anthony Green Street's a great example of that. Sometimes we debundle around the scope, so to take advantage of the cost differential between sticks and bricks construction and earthwork type construction. The BCI tends to be higher than the CPI. So by separating some things out, we try to, maybe see if we can get price differential there. But this is one where we just divided it geographically. So this is now a $16 million project. We just recently received approval from HUD to combine the $3 million FEMA JIRR money into one design. So it's taking blocks that had two neighborhood parks, some of which were a little underutilized, adding stormwater features and public recreation features to those parks. We've had several community engagement events to date that really informed the design of this. And then when we let it out,
Mary, your audio is going out.
Mary, your audio has gone out.
Mr. Threat, you want to take over? And jump to the blue-green corridor?
Next slide.
That would be 2 slides after the St. Anthony Green Streets.
Can I get the next slide?
One after.
I'm back.
Mary.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Joe, would you like to continue or would you like me to pick up?
You can pick up on blue-green.
Great. Thank you so much. So Blue and Green is a very ambitious project. We're taking our neutral grounds and turning them into a circulating water feature, and then green corridors that are going to be enhanced with bioswales. So we're really looking at multi-benefit, where we're not just doing stormwater storage, but we're going to be providing play spaces, community spaces, adult exercise stations, and shade structures. Going back to how important shade structures are. This is another one that we're going to debundle. So you'll see here that we have 3-phase construction, where the blue corridor along Elysian Fields is going to be one project. The Robert E. Lee Green corridor will be another project. And then we have stormwater lots at the intersection with Robert E. Lee. Next slide. So a little example of how we shifted under COVID. I know Joe covered the lantern walk slide, but you can kind of see what we've done here on Blue and Green. So we have large scale banners, specifically so that you could see some text or some message, whether you were driving by, walking by, or riding a bike. And then we also did these mailers that kind of said, these are the things that we've heard from you, and what is it going to look like where I live? So these are some examples of the mailers and the banners that we've done post-COVID. Next slide. St. Bernard Neighborhood Campus. This is one where we are awaiting HUD's approval to add some money to this through an action plan amendment. It's an $11 million project that's very heavy on recreation. Very heavy on recreation. So we have football field, softball field, a concession stand, and then we're adding a playground for younger children there at Bayou St. John. We reached a point on this project where, because of updates to the model and development in the neighborhood, we realized that we weren't going to be able to do as much stormwater storage and flooding reduction in this neighborhood and do all the recreational amenities that we had planned. We just didn't have enough budget. So we had a choice to make. This area historically was Willie Hall Playground, so the need for recreation is great there, but the flooding issue is also very, front of mind. And we decided that we didn't want to compromise either. We looked at our budgets, we looked at the projections, and we identified $4 million in money that had been identified for city staff and city expenses. So not taking away construction budget from any of the other projects, just identifying some city efficiencies. And we made an amendment to HUD to move this money around and put it on the St. Bernard project. That went out for public comment in December of this year. We wrapped up that public comment period, and it's now under review by HUD. We're hoping that we'll get the approval to make this change, add money to St. Bernard, that will be able to give us the full vision. So both flooding reduction, the correct amount of stormwater storage under the football field, and all the amenities that we have talked about. So full.
when do we anticipate a response by HUD? Because it's been up for review for some time. So anxious and the neighbors and the community trying to see when phase one can go to construction.
We appreciate that. We anticipate a response from HUD hopefully by May 30th.
And then out to bid.
I think out to bid, we would be looking at 45 to 60 days for the first portion.
Yeah, I mean, and understandably, the community of, Willie Hall and the St. Bernard area is frustrated because this particular project has been going on for roughly 5 years. It's been some time now. So I'm hoping that of the 90% design figure my office has been given for some time now, that design should be completed and everything should be ready to go once these cross fingers amendment is approved for the $4 million reallocation.
That's right. When we originally put out the substantial amendment to the public, it was in December. We did get some comments from the public that they felt like putting it out over the holiday was too brief. So we advertised it again and did a second presentation. So we did add some time to our public comment, but that was specifically, we didn't want to give something that was abbreviated to HUD and then they rejected it because they felt like we had not done our due diligence with public comment. So that was a little bit longer, and because of the amount of money being $4 million, we weren't able to do it without a substantial amendment that would require that public comment. The good news is that it's off of our desk. It's done, and we're waiting to hear back from HUD. But we've certainly, done our due diligence with the public and showing how this money will benefit. As you can see, this is one of the ones that we're going to debundle by discipline. So we're looking at doing the athletic fields first, the concession stand, and then doing this flooding reduction, neighborhood green infrastructure improvements, connecting it to the existing drainage system, and then that younger child playground at Bayou St. John.
Thank you. Next slide. The
Miraboo Water Garden. This is one that has also been very much anticipated. There are 2 phases to it. We currently have ready for bid the hazard mitigation part that adds the lagoons, walking trails, and the pump house to move water into the park. Similar to the approach that we talked about with City Park, where we're talking about providing relief on the drainage system by routing something through the park, and then also by using the park to let this be absorbed into the ground somewhat. We had some delay on this project due to the back-to-back cyber attacks at the state and at the city. We had to reroute the funding agreement. So we're on track now to have that bid out and expecting to do that in the next 4 weeks to 6 weeks. We're also going to be starting the design phase that's funded by HUD. The design phase funded by HUD will allow us to do more educational signage to really tie this together and educate the public on the kinds of things that they can take on their own property. Next slide. Hillard Wetlands, it's ironically the same size as Miraboo, but it's a little bit overlooked. There's 25 acres. It's on London Avenue Canal, opposite from Dillard University. It's about a triangular shaped piece of land that was just never used. It was cut over once for timber. So we have in the middle of the city
25 acres of forest. And as you can tell from the photos, we need to remove some invasive trees. We need to add some native trees. And we have worked with the public on what they would like to see out there. Ideally, we plan to add walking trails, an outdoor classroom, a play area. We did hear from residents around the park that they're interested in having a play area that they can take their children to in the neighborhood. And we would love to connect this to outdoor education. We've been working with NORD on making sure that this works well with some of their other nature-based activities that they have at Joe Brown and at the Sankofa Wetlands Park. This is one that's a little bit younger in design. So we presented 30% design to the RDRC, and the team is currently working on 60% design. We do anticipate to wrap this up and break ground this year. Next slide. The Milneburg neighborhood. This is one that we're looking at, again, our excellent partner, Nora. So we're looking at city-owned or other public parks inside the Milneburg neighborhood. And then also looking at, do we have the opportunity on Nora lots to do some pocket parks? So same concept, adding stormwater storage underground where it's needed, above ground in a grass depression where possible, or through bioswales. And then again, adding trees, adding trees to look at the urban heat component, but trees also help us out quite a bit with just how much stormwater goes into the drainage system. This is one where we had to change location from the Milne Trust land to these neighborhood parks. So this is also pending the action plan amendment that's with HUD right now. Next slide. Pontilly 2 is also sometimes referred to as Dwyer Canal. So if we think back to the hazard mitigation project that we talked about, and how comprehensive that was across both Gentilly Woods and Pontchartrain Park, hazard mitigation doesn't pay for anything that's not directly related to reducing flooding. So what this project is going to do is add a pedestrian bridge over Dwyer Canal, connecting those two neighborhoods, and then turn the canal banks themselves into a linear park. And we're looking at adding public art that will provide a destination. Now that we have a historic designation of Pontchartrain Park on the National Register of Historic Places, we want to provide a destination for tourists. Where can they come and actually learn about how historically significant Pontchartrain Park was? And where can they possibly hear recordings of former residents and what living there meant to them? So we're looking at adding public park to this project as well. We had some issues with the first design contract, so we have had to put this out for re-procurement, and that's currently working its way through our procurement department. So we expect to have that advertised for re-procurement by the end of Q2. This completes our update for NDR, but I'd like to, obviously, we can go back to any slides if you have other specific questions, or if there are questions about the program overall.
Thank you, Ms. Kincaid and Mr. Threat, Ms. Bro, and Ramsey for the presentation. UBL, is there any public comment?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. Thank you, and we appreciate you all's work, and send those supplement documents that we discussed, and we look forward to the groundbreakings of and construction of each of these projects, and expanding these initiatives citywide. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you. Next item is agenda item number 4, presentation on the American Rescue Plan. This discussion of scope, limitations, and or restrictions of the current and future infrastructure funds available to the city of New Orleans under the American Rescue Plan, Joint Infrastructure Recovery, proposed federal infrastructure bill, existing city bonds, the $500 million of bonds approved by the voters in 2019, and any funds that will become available following the potential 2022 debt reduction, and how those resources can be used in concert to maximize positive impact on the city and for our residents. We have Chief Administrative Officer Gilbert Montano and our Chief Finance Officer Norman White here to discuss the recently passed American Rescue Plan, or ARP for short. This presentation was initially deferred from the April Budget Committee meeting while we waited for guidance from the federal government on the use of American Rescue Plan funding. ARP is a watershed moment for local government. New Orleans has suffered significant revenue losses from COVID-19 that has resulted in hiring freezes, employee furloughs, and delayed investment in needed public service. I am hopeful that we will be able to turn this financial downturn around with the help of ARP funding resources. The Department of Treasury released its interim guidance on May 10th, and according to it, New Orleans will receive $388 million as a direct local government allotment. We also anticipate receiving another $9 million from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development to combat our homeless problem. It's also possible that New Orleans may see even more federal investments from many of the other allocations included in the ARP. Considering the amount of money that is about to flow our way, I requested the CAO and the CAFO to appear today to discuss their plans for the use of this funding, and in concert with my colleague and chairman, Joe Geruso, as it relates to, of course, what's important to all of us and the city's future. Of course, infrastructure is the forefront of our minds. Councilmember Geruso, Mr. Chairman, would you like to make any statement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I just think this is a unique opportunity that we have given these different pots of money. And I think the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, is what money is restricted for certain uses and what money has flexibility to it. And I think after what we saw yesterday, and here we are with another boil water advisory, that we can't argue that infrastructure isn't one of the most important, if not the most important needs in the city right now. I know that we're working diligently on getting a substation, and thank the mayor's office for the work on that, along with Energy and Sewage and Water Board. But at the same time, we have an aging infrastructure system that predates by decades either this administration or this council. And what are we doing to start using this money that we have and planning for our future as a result? So that's what I'm interested in hearing. And I know Gilbert, there's some of the slides that talk about ineligibility, and so I'm curious, because it seems like there's some pretty big exceptions in the ineligibility, and how that factors in, and with fair share, and then sort of what the future looks like too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Geruso, and wholeheartedly agree with your sermon and statement. Mr. Montano, are you on?
Yes, can you hear me? All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee, for having us here today. I appreciate the questions and the upcoming dialogue and the deep analysis the city's trying to establish as a result of a very and monumental piece of legislation that is passed and we feel can really change the trajectory of New Orleans whole and proper moving forward. As you said, Norman White is also on, as is Ramsey Green, and we will all partly participate in some of the questions and some of the dialogue as it relates to some of the bonds, and then any further elaboration on some of the methodology and equations that we decide to calculate or that we calculate as a result of revenue loss. So I'll start certainly the presentation and I'll go through it in a relatively expeditious manner because many of this information you have seen in the past, and really try to dive into some of those direct questions prior to the presentation that you all addressed relative to Monday's interim final rule guidelines that we addressed. And I don't know if you've all seen it. It's about 151 pages of the interim final rule. Noticed I'll say interim again. It's still interim, but we're hearing and confident that will turn into something close to the final rule from the Department of Treasury. But within that 151 pages, there is a lot of insight and information that we are ready to provide and hopefully move towards. So with that being said, I believe Chad is operating the PowerPoint, and so I'll just kind of dive right into it, and I'll go through the presentation, and of course, members of the committee, feel free to interject or ask any questions of myself or any of the team members as we proceed. All right, Chad, we're ready. Just a normal table of contents kind of gives you an idea of what we're going to discuss, and I know you all have seen this, but we can dive directly into it. I know this seems very reoccurring, but I always like to level set and really, as we talk about the importance of the ARP funds, really articulate how we have to look at them over the course of a multi-year period, and not as just a one-time piece that we can interject and spend unfruitfully in some cases. So I always try to show where New Orleans is placed as far as the economic recovery and what's projected to recover, as our revenue is not matched up with our revenue pre-2019. And it really demonstrates why we have to really factor in the use of these funds over the long haul and plan for them in accordance for a several years out period, so that we can sustain the operations necessary to carry us through this pandemic and also recover fully from our revenue side. So I always like to throw that out there, and then I'll dive to the next one that you've probably seen before that further exacerbates where we are based on the sensitivity analysis and what the work that we've all participated in to really show where those deficits are. And later in the presentation, you'll ever see the 5-year plan on really what that final number is. But I just always like to include these so that we have a mindset going into these large numbers that we're receiving from the federal government, but also the even larger numbers that we're projecting to lose as a result of some of that lost revenue, and that we have to be extremely cautious and judicious on how these funds are allocated so that we can cover the most important operations within city government that have significantly fallen since the COVID-19 pandemic. All right, we can keep going. All right, so CARES Act, this is also one of the issues that I always want to articulate, inclusive of the last two, is what the first CARES Act we're eligible for, what we received, and what was left on the table as a result of our eligible expenses. And of course, that number is at $76 million that was approved in expenditures that we never received as a city, that forced us into some of those very difficult decisions as far as furloughs and some of those other really to the bone cuts that we had to address based on some of the policy decisions from our original CARES Act funding. And we can keep going, Chad. This gives another recap and an overview of the first CARES Act funding. I want to make sure that that's always articulated. and understood on how and where the amount was dispersed and who received what based on the first CARES Act funding, and understand that as we dive into the ARP funding, I'm very confident in the team put together to help manage and identify this as well, so that we could have similar and important accounting measures so that we can identify how and where that money was spent over the course of the long haul, because certainly the federal guidelines will require that. And I do want to thank the Lenitra, she may or may not be on, that's who's been assigned with tracking and managing our ARP funds along with her team. And they've done such an excellent job over the course of the first CARES Act. I wanted to provide that information to the council because we are confident as an administration and her team to be able to carry us the same way we did in the first CARES Act.
And Gilbert, I'm glad you brought that up, because my question is related to reimbursement and expenses and tracking. How as us as a city government, how have all of COVID mitigation efforts been tracked? And can you go into that? And will the administration be submitting any budget ordinances in relation to these expenditures for the council to appropriate?
Yes, yes, and yes, and yes. And I'll answer those with a little specificity. Of course, through the pandemic, all the different agencies submitted their forced account labor sheets, all the information as it related to those above and beyond the normal scope that required funding at some level through COVID that we tried to seek reimbursement from, through the CARES Act, through the state, through the FEMA dollars and all the different venues of it. Now, in many cases, we are, as you'll see later in the operational personnel spending, there are agencies that are overspending as a result of us removing some of the furlough days and some of the hiring practices that the council will have to come to, and will request additional funding based on what we feel and hopeful is part of this ARP funding to reestablish and better align the budgets for the further years out. So the short answer is yes, we're going to have to come to the council. I think we had discussed maybe somewhere around a summer REC so that we could have a better feel of where we were, and then we'll have some level of cleanup ordinance or request a cleanup ordinance to better sustain the agencies from some of that loss that they'd had. And then obviously we're already in May, budget season is going to be starting in June. So it's all conflating together at a really good time, frankly, for us to be able to clean up a lot. So I suspect over the course of the next month or two, there'll be a lot of requests to the council once we level out kind of where we're going and where we want to go, and come to terms on where we should go as far as the city with these dollars and all the competing interests thereof. I hope that answers your question, Chairman Brissett.
Yeah, you have, in a roughly timeline, you're saying a few weeks to, 4 to 6 weeks.
That would be my suspicion. There's a lot of internal work that we have to be able to establish too. I don't want to put you on the spot, Norman, but if you wanted to add anything to that timeline, feel free to. But that was my estimate, probably. Certainly summertime, we're going to have to make all of this come together and conflate. But if you wanted to add anything, feel free. If not, I can just keep going.
No, I think you articulated well.
Hey, Gilbert, this is Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, council member, I think to your other piece of the question, like Gilbert said, Lenitra Hassan is the city's federal grant manager that handles the HMGP, JIRR, all the federal monies. Just as a reminder, this the CARES Act funding is Treasury money, it's federal money. So Ms. Hassan's job is to coordinate those federal dollars along with the other federal dollars with the two PWs that we have active with FEMA for mass feeding and with COVID-19 pandemic response to make sure we don't have duplication of benefits. So we are tracking the federal dollars. We're going to make sure we don't duplicate benefits to where the city may owe the federal government back those dollars, and we'll track these throughout the process.
Thank you,
And
Joe.
Joe, you probably wanted to add the fact of, in this particular case, the money will be fronted to us opposed to reimbursed, if you will, which is different from our normal activity.
Yeah, exactly. And we expect, like most federal operations, that on the back end, after we've been fronted the money, that there'll be some reporting process to where we'll have to show how we spent those dollars.
Thank you. Chairman, may I continue?
Yes. Mhm.
We can go to the next slide, once again, this is more for historical knowledge and future reference for anybody or in the public, but just gives a broad overview of the $350 billion related to it and how it's allocated and what it's for. Don't have to dive too much into that because that is well known, but I feel it important for historical reasons to maintain some of these slides within our presentation. We can keep going. Just gives you another broad perspective. Notice the state of Louisiana is getting $3 billion. We're getting $387.5 million. You'll see the breakup on how that is allocated for the rest of the country. When it says we'll get 2 equal tranches. Now, remember, as a parish, we're getting parish dollars and city dollars. And I don't know if we've had complete clarity yet whether we're going to get half of that initially, or if it's going to be broken up into those 4 different pieces. I think that's more to come, and more of a technical piece that we have to address. But it's 4 pots that we're coming from: 2 from the city, 2 from the parish, and then figuring out how to reconcile those moving forward. But we can keep going. This allows kind of just more of an informational slide relative to what we're receiving. As you mentioned, and we've all addressed, the interim final rule was on May 10th, which provide that clarification for some of the uses and restrictions. And I will say that we've spent a significant amount of time dissecting, reading, understanding them. We've built a project team to be able to carry these out, and we're certainly not sitting idle waiting. We're working toward establishing all this, and I know there's been multiple meetings over the course of this week to address exactly how, what, and where these funds can go, and especially what is eligible and what's not eligible. All right, we can go to the next slide, Chad. This gives just a little bit of the discussion on the objectives, what it's designed for. Once again, more for a public consumption, so that there's knowledge base or what some of the more technical questions and discussions will cover, but we can keep sliding, Chad. Once again, what is allowed, some areas that it's supported for, and the rationale and reasons for it. We can do those, Chad. Councilmember Giarrusso, I think this is what you addressed earlier. I was a little bit more global on what some of those ineligible uses are. Of course, pension fund deposits, rainy day funds or financial reserves, debt service, legal settlements, and general infrastructure. I think we have a strong team together to try to work through some of these challenges to address how we focus on our operational needs, but still able to manage these funds accordingly over the course of the long term. And there is a way to thread the needle that I think that the city of New Orleans can be continue to be progressive, but also ensure that we're conservative on how we're going to leave the city in the next several years.
Gilbert, can I just ask a couple questions on that regard? I guess first is, it sounds like there's just carve outs for water and sewer and broadband to start with, right? So, you can spend on water and sewer and broadband potentially with the money, period.
The answer is yes. That is articulated specifically. But then I also want to go into that a little bit in the infrastructure bill as well.
Okay. Yeah.
That as well.
And then Gilbert, when it talks about, and this was the part that caught my eye, under the revenue loss provision. So we lost revenue for fair share because of everything going down. Does that mean we can use ARP funds to backfill the fair share money? Because we had plugged into the equation, I think for 2020, fair share revenue to go to DPW and SWIBNO.
Sure. So this is an important question and an important distinction that will require significant policy decisions for it. I believe, yes, it is eligible for that. However, when we did our methodology and our calculation for revenue loss, we've only focused on general fund. Fair share is a special fund, and we did not factor that into some of our overall loss. And you'll see later in the presentation that $517 million revenue loss over the course of the next 5 years does not include special funds. So that does not include the loss that we had for our EDIF, or any other kind of special fund that we have there. So if we were to evaluate and try to refill some of that portion of special funds, we would have to take it from our corpus general fund, and that only makes that $517 million number bigger than what it actually is. So it's just going to be a competing interest on whether or not, the core services, everything from sanitation, police, fire, other, is affected by what the fair share dollars are. And I think that's going to be a debate and a discussion, and certainly we're willing to present all sides to it. But I hope that answers your question on, I'm not the say all on what's eligible or ineligible. It makes sense that it's eligible. However, it's just a matter of whether or not we are including special funds or continuing to focus on our normal operations for city government, which is the general fund.
Yeah, no, I get all that. I think we've delayed a lot of things, understandably, because fair share didn't get funded. And I know we haven't gotten all of our CARES Act funding that we want, but I know the mayor has fought so hard for fair share, and to try and make sure that we're working to backfill that would be important. And then I guess, Gilbert, are we still circling at what the surplus was for last year too? I think in January, we heard it was like $38 or $39 million. Is that still an accurate number? Or are you still trying to tease that out with the audit?
Well, I'm gonna kick it over to Norman. I had not heard the $38 million surplus, so I'll defer to Norman. And yes, we're still in the midst of the audit, but go ahead and Norman, do you mind talking about the surplus?
I'm assuming, Councilmember, are you referring to 2019's surplus?
I thought it was 2020. That's why I was surprised, because I thought in January, that's what I thought I heard. If it's wrong, that's fine. But
I would agree with you. I think in 2019, we're looking at about a $7 million surplus.
Okay.
For 2020, I definitely not that high. I think we're teetering given our revenue losses.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Gilbert, while we were on this particular slide about ineligibility, want to focus on a personnel funding issue in which it's been stated in support of it is repaying the city employees who were forced to take furloughs. One question, when will the administration compensate the employees for furloughs? And then the second part of that question, since pension funds are ineligible, those funds won't be deducted. Is that correct?
Let me start with the first question, Councilmember Chairman Brosset. I think that once again, we got the stuff on Monday. Now that it does require us to go to before the Civil Service Commission to request this exact reimbursement process, as was always designed, because they had to allow for it to happen in the first place. I think we are still in the the mayor's made it clear that she supports this and we're going to move it forward. So right now it's just more of a technical question on timing and how we're going to factor this into the bigger picture. One of the things I think that we've always tried to do as an administration is be holistic instead of one-offing. Let's put this here, let's put this here, let's put this here. Now we did do that for overtime and furloughs so we can sustain operations. But for some of the one-off stuff, I think we want to take a little bit of a comprehensive picture and a comprehensive perspective on how we're going to do that. That, needless to say, I don't see that being months. I see that being closer toward, more the summertime, where we're able to establish that, then also move forward with the Civil Service Commission recommendation, and then we'll be able to factor in the dollars moving forward. I saw you unmuted, Norman. Did you want to jump in on any of that?
Yeah, I guess the pension conversation, I think I was going to jump in if you're finished with the first part.
Yes.
Yeah. If you look at on the presentation, what they refer to as pension fund ineligibility is really trying to deal with the unfunded or the unfunded liability, right? The difference between
UAL.
Yep. And I think what you're referring to, as far as if we're going back and paying furlough days, it would be the payroll contribution. That's the last sentence. It says funds can be used for routing payroll contributions for employee pension. So I believe that's what we're focusing on going forward, as well as reaching back for the last quarter of 2020 and roughly around the first 3 months of this year. So we will be able to contribute. Now, the key is when we contribute, how would that affect the pension? And we'll talk to the pension systems to ensure that it gets properly addressed. But we can use it for that purpose. So the answer would be we will be funding that too as well.
So it can be funded, can be deducted.
Yes.
Thank you. Gilbert, on the capacity issue within city government, can you give us an idea of what's the administration's approach in relation to capacity in remote activity? What do you all foresee? Will it be a mix as we move forward of City Hall staffing with as it relates to remote work? You want to touch on that?
Sure, and I'll be broad in the sense where, as an administration, if you're a customer-facing agency, if you're a safety and permits, if you're an agency that requires public interaction, we're going to be pushing for 100% of people here in their seats to be able to provide services to the public. So that's an important factor. We want to have a public face. We want to have a public interaction. We want people to be able to touch City Hall the way they did in the past. Now, on more of the back office work, more of the workflows that do not require that same public interaction as necessary, and if there is good productivity occurring as a result of some of the supervisors managing accordingly, that's where we're going to really kind of hold down and almost take a case by case. And when I say case by case, department by department perspective on what works best for that work remote perspective. But as far as those individuals and employees that have to deal and face with the public on a given basis, there will be a movement toward 100% residency as far as being in City Hall or the satellite offices relative to that. I think that's an important thing for the public to have and the public to see. And as far as, once again, whether you're in the law department and you have a work remote day, 2 days out of the week and you're here 3, that's going to be up more to that department director. And I think it's important to empower them to be able to run their shops to have the highest level of production necessary. There's pros and cons. There's good interaction that happens when employees are here, but then there still is some safety concerns, and there's just some efficiency concerns that people work here and there. And so there's I hope that answers your question, at least from the perspective of the public facing employees as opposed to more that back office crew.
It does. Thank you for that, Gilbert, and I 100% agree with you as it relates to the 100%, the public-facing department. The example I would think of is safety and permits is probably the best example and the most interfacing. Can you give us an idea of when will they be at 100%, considering the type of services that they provide with building permits, electrical, mechanical, and so forth?
I may have to stand corrected, but I believe they are at 100% as far as their staff there. I don't believe anyone's working remote from safety and permits from the public service perspective. Now, how they're dealing with some of the walk-ins and the walk-in process, I think has augmented a little bit. So let me qualify that with, let me be more specific and get back with you on how they're running as far as walk-in basis versus appointments and some of those dynamics. But as far as the staff, it is my understanding that the staff is no longer remote at all and has since been on the 7th floor at full capacity.
Thank you. We can follow up later, definitely.
Chairman Brissett, can I ask one question?
Yeah,
Related
Councilman
to
Chairman.
Thank you. And also Gilbert with city planning, are they in a rehiring position too right now? I know that there have been some cuts there, and they said there's work that they can't do right now as a result of this. And like, obviously they have legal obligations they need to meet. And we don't want to push them beyond their boundaries to do things where they're not supposed to go. But just kind of curious, when they'll be able to start hiring again and getting the ball moving.
Sure. I'm wondering if Councilmember Palmer slipped you this note. This is usually her.
No, I would say if that were the case, but this is me.
Ironically, I had Mr. Rivers and Mr. Bowen in my office yesterday, and to try to figure out, they had a weird kind of, I won't go into the technical details because I want to directly answer your question as far as their hires. And they are allowed to hire exactly what they have lost. So I believe the memo I signed off on yesterday, based on their 2020 funding, allows them to move forward with something in the realm of 5 positions. They were at 21, then they went down to 12. They should take them back up to 17. There was some promotional pieces in there. They've had a deputy director that's been running the agency. There's your CPC I'm specifically talking about. So there should be in the queue right now, or starting in the queue, if not already there, at least somewhere in the realm of 5 positions where they can advertise. Mr. Rivers is bumping some folks up to allow for lower level in. So the short answer is the hiring process should be ongoing right now to be able to get to the 2020 level. Now, he's also, and what I told him yesterday, and I'll tell you directly, is for the additional positions outside of what is under that 2020 level, he has enough room to hire right now in the 2020. The additional positions somewhere in the realm of 4 to 5. Once again, I said I'd like us to be more holistic and start directly developing these budgets with departments specifically. I think Norman and his team plan on doing that in the next week or so, meeting individually with the agencies on what their needs are, so we can better assess both the need as far as their work product, how long it will take, and then the amount of staffing needed to recover. So 2-pronged answer. 1, they should be hiring now that they have the green light and they have the funding for 2020. And then 2, for 2021, I apologize. And then for the future additional outside that funding perspective, we'll be meeting with them in the very near future, each department, to be able to address some of those specific asks.
Thanks, Gilbert. And also not related to CPC, but related to sort of the hiring issue, is we're also starting to just get some inquiries about EMS too. And, I don't know if you want to address that right now, but just in terms of what the future looks like, maybe being prepared to talk about that too, because for whatever reason, people are circling around their budget in particular.
Well, I can tell you that what I say for EMS could translate to EMD. It could translate to 7 other agencies as well. There were cuts, right? And we've had to reestablish some of the and make decisions. And this goes back to why we want to make sure that these dollars are spent properly, so that we can better and adequately fund these agencies. EMS is a challenging agency to hire and retain individuals. Certainly, it's a challenging field of work. I have a significant challenge with their infrastructure as far as their ambulances and some of the equipment relative to that. It's hard to keep 25 on the street. Sometimes we drop down to 19. There are a lot of challenges relative to some of our public safety agencies, especially on the equipment side. One of the things that I want to continue to establish is a robust maintenance plan and schedule. I think providing our public safety servants with good, reliable equipment means a great deal, more than we'd ever imagined, to be able to have good, reliable equipment. And that's been a forefront priority that we've had since day one. The hiring is open. I've never rejected, and I know certainly the mayor hasn't, the request or the ask for additional paramedics outside of what they need. I think it's a training program also that we're trying to reestablish. I know Dr. Nichols is doing some great work on how to create more efficiencies on the training perspective, meaning how do we get more people in without having to go through all the hoops. There's a lot of different pieces to that. I have not heard directly what you're addressing as far as some of the rumblings or concerns for the budget, other than what I just addressed. But I'm happy to meet and discuss with Dr. Nichols or Chief Samaran to address whatever they're dealing with. But my information has mainly been about the equipment and some of the status of the equipment, and of course some of the training efficiencies to be able to get more paramedics out there at any given time.
Thanks, Gilbert.
Sure.
Thank you, Chairman Caruso. And Gilbert, right quick back, you mentioned about CPC. If they hired 5 more people, that would take them back to the 2020 levels?
Yes. And I don't want to, I may be off 1 or 2, and this is from memory of my meeting yesterday, but there's a formalized memo I signed yesterday as well. I believe it's 5 does take them back to the 2020 levels. Yes.
Which is a total of?
I believe that took them back to 19 employed, or 18, somewhere in that realm. I think at their peak, they were at 21, and then
You mentioned 21 earlier.
Yeah, and I think that was in 19. 21 was in 19. I was hoping my phone would blow up with text messages to get me straight, but it hasn't yet. But so maybe toward the end of the discussion, I'll be able to have that. But those numbers are close. They're not too off. It's 1 or 2 bodies to be able to hire and promote.
And then, do you know when those CPC positions were posted, job postings?
Well, probably they have not yet been posted. Let me get more information on that, because they just got approved of it from yesterday. They went through this kind of snapshot freeze period during July when we were doing all the cuts, and then they had a couple people left, and then there was a little bit of bifurcation on what was funded for 2020, what is new, but I think we've gotten all that straight. And I know they've met with finance multiple times. They met with my office yesterday, and I felt after the meeting that we most recently had, we're all on the same page.
Thank you. All right, you can follow up with me.
Sure, okay. Let's keep going, Chad. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so the lost revenue, this is an important piece that I wanted to highlight is, the use of these funds is to restore services and replace revenue loss as a result of the pandemic. I feel like this is really where we're honing in on a lot of our focus, because this is one of the broadest categories for municipalities to use these ARP funds for. Now, you'll see that we have an estimated revenue loss through 2025 of almost $517 million. Now, those numbers do not represent, yeah, go ahead and bring it in. Sorry, I'm getting the CPC information too, so be able to provide that after. Those numbers do not represent a spike in coronavirus, an outbreak, or any kind of other major issues. This just provides a steady state based on incremental growth from our economists, and then that moving forward. We can go to the next slide of, I think, the chart, Chad. And this shows kind of how we've outlined the revenue forecast as far as the revenue picture. And And I'll stand corrected, but this does not include the special funds. And that was to the point of Councilmember Giarrusso that we're projecting that $517 million loss, which is obviously lower than the $387 million that we're getting from the federal government.
So Gilbert, you would conservatively say that our revenue loss projected for 2021 would be roughly somewhere around 90.5, 90.6 million.
Yes, that is the projection right now. Norman, did you want to add it or qualify anything to that 90 million?
No, I think if you recall, that's based on the budget and the REC information, and the budget was built around $100 million reduction. And so that figure stands as of today.
And just to add in for our appreciation in the public, the methodology used to put these numbers together.
If you go back to, these are the same numbers that were presented in the REC. And then what we did, if you look at the
Well, it's been a while, so it's been a while. No,
I agree with that. I agree with that.
It's
if you go back to the
pandemic memory loss.
I feel you on that one. So on the pre-pandemic revenue, if we go back, we were already looking at 3% growth. If you look at 2018, we're at 688. That's an actual number. 2019, we're sitting at 713. That's pretty much, I'm comfortable around that number as well. And so that's why you see the post-pandemic number, because it had not occurred at that point. Around 2020 is when we built the budget around the 721. We knew our revenue was growing from that 713 to 721. And in the REC, we built the revenue projection based on those 4 years. So that's the official document that we use when we predicted our revenue, given our history. And so once the pandemic hit, we knew we were looking at about $151 million loss at that point. Now, when we look at the CARES Act money coming in and some other extraneous monies that were added to it, and then the cuts, those are actual losses, but this is what we consider our budgetary loss based on our official information. And then you go from 2020, is just continue that projection all the way down based on the REC information, and then comparing that to the new revised revenue based on the post-pandemic information, because we went from 721 to roughly 570 in 2020. We built the budget around 633 million for 2021, opposed to the 724, and then that just carried all the way out as we looked at our information, and that's how we projected within the REC information. What you see is the pre-pandemic and the post-pandemic information. And I think if you looked at Gilbert's page, I think 2 pages ago, that talk about our revenue loss, this is what we suspect that we have a problem. Now, the key would be is we did mitigate the losses by cutting certain things and transferring, but this is what we consider our revenue loss if business would have occurred as normal.
Chairman Brissett, not to pause, but I do have the information on CPC that I can share while we're recently on the topic, if you'd like.
Yes.
Okay. And I hope I don't see Councilmember Giarrusso's face, but I'm hoping he's listening. So it's actually 6 hires that were approved in the 2021 budget that they're moving forward on, and 4 promotions. Promotions meaning they're going from one position to a higher position so that we can backfill the other. And the new hires include senior planner, principal planner, senior planner, office assistant, and senior planner. And then I have some movement from planning administrator to deputy director, principal planner to assistant planning administrator, and senior planner to principal planner, and senior city planner to senior planner. So altogether, 4 movements and 6 new hires that were signed and should be moving forward.
Thank you, Gilbert.
You bet. All right. So, Chad, I think that we can go to the next slide. This goes into the American Jobs Plan. Now, we know that President Biden proposes $2.2 trillion infrastructure bill that funds transportation, water, broadband, schools, housing, and electric infrastructure. We're extremely excited about this opportunity, especially for New Orleans infrastructure. And we were very excited at the president's visit recently to be able to see firsthand exactly what it meant as far as eroding infrastructure and some of the needs and the purposes. This city of New Orleans is exactly why this bill is designed in some cases, and we're hopeful and confident to see as much opportunity to benefit from it as possible. But this just breaks down some of the details. Once again, adds a little bit more of the details on what the proposal is going to go and where it's going to go. Then we can keep going down. This talks about how, the visit really talked about, and he was able to see firsthand where it was. We're hopeful and confident, that moves forward. That's still in the chambers of the House or the Senate. I'm not even sure exactly where it is right now. However, we're anticipating it. We have people on the ground supporting it, advocating for it, and we're doing all we can to prepare should it become a reality for New Orleans.
And Gilbert, just that you're on that topic right now, and what is the plan as a result, will be a result of the infrastructure bill to become law, the use of the funding. The big picture is we need a new system overall for the viability of our city's future, clean drinking water, drainage system, and so forth, from potential flooding. And Chairman Geruso spoke about the substation, where we want to have Entergy come in and take control of electric instead of our archaic gas system, and not have this labor-intensive what we've been used to, and more technology managed based new system going forward. What is the plan come we have a large disbursement of funds from the federal government?
Chairman Brosette, and the large disbursement of funds, meaning from the infrastructure bill, I assume you're talking about. I think the plan is certainly to focus on sewage and water board, infrastructure and power, and drinking water. I think it was notable that that's where the mayor recommended the president to go. That's where the president went. That is ultimately what the vast majority of that conversation was about. And certainly a priority, making sure your streets don't flood and the water is clean to drink from is the ultimate priority, I believe, for the mayor as it related to the conversation with President Biden. But there's also so many pieces of that infrastructure bill that we would be remiss if we didn't say that we're going to try to capitalize on anything. Certainly the modernizing our sewage and water board, power and drinking water is a top priority. But if there is opportunities that are willing, we're going to, accept everything we possibly can and put it to the highest and best use. Everything from broadband to our street replacement. So I think that we will anticipate and wait for what that we hope number will be as far as it comes down, but there will be no shortage of needs for whatever that number is. And I assure you that it probably will not even match the needs that we currently have. So it'll just be a matter of what we prioritize. But to answer your question directly, the sewage and water board piece was the top priority for the mayor as she spoke with the president.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Gilbert. Chairman Geruso, you wanted to make a comment?
No, I mean, I think what Gilbert says makes a lot of sense. I mean, the only thing I would say is obviously and I know, Gilbert, you've been having a lot of conversations, particularly Councilmember Moreno, about this. The more money that we can find to help offset particularly the frequency changers and even a piece of the substation, the more savings it means over the life of the substation for sewage and water board. I mean, and Gilbert, I'm happy to get to talk to you separately, but like the options of sewage and water board not needing to pay for the frequency changers in particular, I mean, the math works out really well for them really fast. So I'll share that with you separately, and I'm happy to talk to you about that.
Okay, thank you. And then I think the last slide is just in summation, really just really punctuates the need to be thoughtful of this dollars as being one time and making sure that we're managing them accordingly, trying not to ever be circular as far as what we fund that we can't pay for in 5 years, and understanding that this is our time to really change the trajectory of the next decades to come with this investment from the federal government. I mean, the federal government in many cases became a venture capitalist, and now they're investing in New Orleans, and we're excited to accept those dollars, and we're confident and battle tested, frankly, to be able to use them to the highest and best use. With that, Chairman Brissett, members of the committee, we would stand for any questions. However, I take that back because I want to Ramsey and or Joe Threat to be able to highlight that bond question you all asked as far as the beginning of the presentation, if it's the will of the chairman.
Thank you. Yes, we do want to highlight that portion of the agenda and agenda item. Thank you, Gilbert, and thank the mayor for her leadership as we continue to work towards better infrastructure for our city. Ramsey, Joe Threat, Chairman Geruso, if you want to jump in.
Not at this moment. I mean, I guess, Ramsey, is there any more, update on the bond money? I think the last that I knew about was that, was it 289 million was supposed to be approved by Board of Lick? And I guess A, has that happened? And then B, are we going to start, if that has happened, are we going to start seeing a list of proposed projects to get on the streets?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Yeah, no, thanks, Councilman Brissett and Geruso for bringing this up. The issuing of the bonds is tracking for July 15th through August 15th, somewhere in that window. We do have the list of projects. We will, I mean, you all were briefed on it during the capital budget process in October. The list has not changed very little since then, but we will do a briefing with you once we get closer to that date. You also had on here, Councilman Brissett, a question about, and Joe had a medical appointment, so I'm gonna just cover this for him. I think he just took off. When we came in the door as of May 1st, 2018, there was $114 million in dated bond money sitting on the books. The balance is now 38.7 million. And we've spent about 73 million since 2018, which is why we're now within the ability to issue tax exempt bonds, because we've spent down the bond money. That also includes the 2019 $50 million worth of bonds, which we are not in the same timeline that we were for like a 2014 bond. So we're going to issue tax exempt bonds this summer. Pretty exciting opportunity. And then I'm sorry, Councilman Geruso or Brissett, if I'm missing something that you asked. I did want to cover the old bonds, and then I think I covered the future bonds. Federal priority, I will say this, the federal priorities the mayor articulated to the president were really broken into 5 themes. The first one is the modernization of the sewage and water board power infrastructure, which you all know about. The development of fiber infrastructure, implementing the New Orleans water plan, elevation of the HISDR system, the levee system, and street and drainage improvements. And she made those very clear to the president on Thursday, in particular, item number 1, modernization of power services to sewage and water board.
I mean, I get Rams. That sounds great. I guess one thing we should all think about though is, I guess to my mind with the infrastructure, the flexibility of the money, and also what's coming in with federal dollars potentially on HAP, right? And that we may have had a plan before, and the plan's a good one, but do we want to optimize flexibility based on the fact that there's moves that even we don't know about yet, right? Like the HAP we think is going to happen, but we don't know is going to happen. We don't know what the rules are. ARP has happened, and we have, as I think as Gilbert said, interim rules. So just making sure we're maximizing our spend based on what we kind of know is coming.
Absolutely, and we're in agreement, and we're looking at various options along with the Sewage and Water Board on power solutions, as you mentioned earlier. I fully acknowledge that.
Thank you, Chair Brissett. Thank you, Ramsey.
Thank you, Ramsey. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Seeing or hearing no any questions. Yubi, is there any public comment?
Councilmember, there are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. And Gilbert, Norman, Ramsey, Joe, thank you all for the presentation. We look forward to continuing to work together, and please keep us up to date as this moves forward. Everything is fluid as these days with the movement of the infrastructure bill in Congress, and of course the money that be flowing to the city from ARP.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Brissett and members of the committee. And of course, thank you to the team for doing all the heavy work to put this all together, and appreciate it. And we stand available as needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we are taking up ordinances.
Good afternoon, council members.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
We have ordinance calendar number 33296. This ordinance is to transfer funds from the French Quarter Improvement Fund to the Department of Police to fund a sergeant position and purchase vehicles to expand patrols within the Department of Police, 8th District. The transfer is in the amount of $378,500. Eric Smith is here to provide additional explanation.
Good morning, and thank you for your time today. So,
thank you, Mr. Smith. You want to introduce yourself, Mr. Smith?
Existing appropriation from the French Quarter Improvement Fund to NOPD. For the regular 2021 budget, there was an appropriation to Homeland Security for approximately $565,000. I'm sorry, $575,000, as well as a larger appropriation to the Department of Health. The appropriation to Homeland Security was originally intended to pay for startup costs for an expanded grounds patrol program within the French Quarter. That program's since been put on hold. As the city has been responding to the uptick in crime in the French Quarter, the New Orleans Police Department has authorized a large amount of additional overtime for patrols for proactive patrols inside the French Quarter. Due to department regulations regarding vehicle use, the officers that are manning these overtime shifts within the 8th, if they're traditionally assigned to a district outside of the 8th, are unable to use their department vehicles for these additional overtime patrols. So we've been asked to try and find a way to purchase some additional vehicles specifically for use exclusively within the French Quarter to man these additional overtime patrols. So we identified the appropriation for Homeland Security that was going to go unused and would like to be able to move some of that over to NOPD specifically to purchase those additional vehicles for those overtime patrols, as well as to fund a full-time sergeant position to oversee not just these expanded overtime patrols that are being paid for out of the NOPD budget, but as well the additional police patrols that are being paid for presently through the French Quarter Economic Development District Trust Fund. Those are formerly or more informally known as the French Quarter Task Force patrols. Given the large amount of overtime and the large amount of shifts that are needed to be filled there, it really is a full-time position that the 8th has requested getting filled. As well, we've been discussing for some time a expansion of the homeless assistance unit within the French Quarter. And one of their biggest needs has been a new vehicle with a wheelchair lift. We had put in to purchase this vehicle for use for the public intoxication or sober patrol last year, right before COVID. So the hiring or the spending freeze kind of killed that one. So we've asked that we move the money that had been appropriated to the Department of Health to purchase that vehicle also over to the New Orleans Police Department to purchase that vehicle, since it would be used within the 8th District's Homeless Assistance Unit. I'm here to happy to answer any questions or clear up any concerns regarding this appropriation.
If there are no questions, I would move adoption. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Giarrusso. Mr. Shy, is there any public comment?
Council member, there is one public comment on this item. The comment comes from Mr. Robert Sims at 615 Dumaine Street. He's representing himself. He's not a paid representative. The comment reads, I applaud the city for addressing this critical need. My understanding is that funds from the French Quarter Improvement Account can only be used for services within the boundaries of the French Quarter. Therefore, the proposed ordinance needs to be revised to be more specific on how the $378,500 funds will be used. A suggested revision is as follows. Fund an NOPD 8th District Sergeant position to supervise the French Quarter enhanced security patrols and to purchase small fuel efficient vehicles, black in color, to conduct blue light crime prevention patrols in the French Quarter and replace the aging French Quarter Task Force vehicles. In addition, purchase a handicapped accessible van for the 8th District Homeless Assistance Unit. That completes the comment.
Thank you, Mr. Shy. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4 yeas, no nays, and the ordinance is approved and moved to full council. Next ordinance, Ms. Felton.
Ordinance calendar number 33297. This ordinance is to transfer funds from the Chief Administrative Office and Miscellaneous Programs General Fund to the Mayor's Office of Youth and Family to fund 100 seats to the New Orleans Seats Program, which provides high-quality child care to low-income families with children ages 0 to 2 years. The transfer is in the amount of $1.5 million. Emily Wolf was scheduled to be here to answer additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Felton. Ms. Wolf, you have any public comments? Just like to say that very grateful that this 1.5 is being sent to our young ones to benefit for their futures, and this will benefit, like Ms. Felton said, 0 to 2 years old, 100 seats quality health, early childhood seats for low-income families. So, Ms. Wolf?
Absolutely. Thank you, Council Member. Glad to be with you all this afternoon. Just wanted to say a few words about this. So as the council knows, last year, the city appropriated $3 million to fund 200 early childhood seats to expand that program. And in 2021, the mayor, again, recommitted to that $3 million to make sure that our young people could be served. And so we already have 1.5 million that's in the process of getting, is in the process of being processed by finance right now in order to get to the vendor to fund these seats. And the additional 1.5, this would allocate the additional 1.5 that's needed to get to that 3 million. The exciting thing about this is that all of these dollars, the $3 million that's committed by the city, will be eligible for the state matching program. So we will not only be able to serve the 200 children through this program, through the city seats investment, but an additional 200 through the state match. We're expecting that the state match will come through. There is, and there are a number of bills that would allocate additional tax revenue as well from medical marijuana or sports betting, some other revenue streams as well to fund the state early childhood education matching fund. But the reason that this was so important that we do this and allocate these dollars to the city's general budget is that unfortunately, if we were to use federal dollars, so any of those American Rescue Plan dollars wouldn't be eligible for the state match. So that's what you're seeing here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, we'll move adoption.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Jeruso. Mr. Shai, is there any public comment?
There are 2 public comments on this item. The first comment reads, and it's from Hamilton Simons Jones. The address is 2555 Verbena Street, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70122. They are not a paid representative. Please pass ordinance calendar number 33297. Thank you for the council's continued support of early care and education. We are confident that there will be money at the state level to match this investment dollar for dollar. We still have more than 85% of our infants and toddlers who cannot access quality early care and education in New Orleans. Every bit helps. The next comment. This comes from Dana Henry, and they are not a paid representative. I support item for the continued city investment in quality early childhood seats from birth to 3. That completes the comments.
Thank you, Mr. Shai. It's been moved for adoption and seconded by Councilmember Jeruso. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We have 4 yeas, no nays, and the ordinance is approved and moved to full council. Next ordinance.
Ordinance calendar numbers 33307 and 33308 to appropriate state grant funds awarded by the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement to the New Orleans Police Department Crime Lab to purchase protective and preventive supplies for the crime lab personnel, which will protect them while working on crime scenes and with regard to COVID-19 pandemic environment. The award is in the amount of $58,030, and we have Ms. Antoinette Bradstreet from NOPD to provide additional explanation.
Thank you, Ms. Felton and Ms. Bradstreet. Welcome. You're on mute.
How you doing? Thank you.
Good afternoon.
I just want to say, due to the ongoing needs of supplies, equipment, overtime and personnel at the New Orleans Police Department, our grant division seek for additional funding. Our crime lab have always utilized personal protective equipment, gloves, masks, head coverings, boot coverings, Tyvek suits, etc., to prevent and minimize the exposure of bodily fluids and other harmful contaminants while processing crime scenes. Due to the rising of crime, we are getting short on the supplies. Also, our gloves and masks has increased since COVID-19, and this grant will help us replenish these supplies as needed to provide protection for the employees as well as the citizens they serve.
Thank you for that explanation, Ms. Bradstreet. Any questions, council members? Seeing or hearing none, I would move adoption. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. Mr. Shai, any public comment?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4 yeas, no nays. The ordinance is approved. Next ordinance.
Ordinance calendar numbers 33309 and 33310 to appropriate state grant funds awarded by the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement to the New Orleans Police Department to utilize officer overtime to assist police with conducting increased sex offender compliance checks and track the number of domestic violence follow-up investigations. The award is in the amount of $83,255. Again, we have Ms. Antoinette from NOPD to provide additional explanation.
Mr. Perry is on. He's going to provide the information.
Thank you, Ms. Bradstreet. Mr. Perry. This is grant funds from Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement.
Yes, this is an LCLE grant that we continually apply for every year. Essentially what it is, we have 577 registered sex offenders residing in the city of New Orleans. That does not include the ones that are going to be eligible for release. And typically what we do with this, we complete the required sex offender compliance checks by going out to their residences to make sure that they stay in compliance with their conditions of release of their the tier that they're on. 1, 2, 3 is what it is. And the other portion of this grant is with my unit. It's the domestic violence unit. What we do is it provides additional funding to conduct more domestic violence investigations. Typically, NOPD will respond to about 14,000 calls for service involving domestic violence in any given year. Usually there's about 3,200 arrests out of these cases. And what we do is conduct continual follow-up, and we'll utilize the Family Justice Center resources to help additional victims.
And just to give a little more added information for the public, Mr. Perry, on the domestic violence piece, your unit is dispatching to those particular domestic violence calls for service?
No, sir. We are a follow-up unit assigned at the Family Justice Center. We are New Orleans police officers. It's a small unit. And what we will do is...
You're embedded at the New Orleans Family Justice Center.
Correct, sir.
Gotcha.
Special victim section. And what we do is we try to attend to the more victims with the more serious crimes, the felony crimes. There may already be an arrest, but what we try to have continual engagement with them. We'll try to assist the DA's office in successful prosecution by obtaining additional evidence and so forth. Some of these cases do not get cleared, and what we try to do is engage those victims to reach out to us by bringing them to this facility to put them in a secure, safe environment, and typically that's how we clear those cases.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. I have no more questions. Do I have a motion to approve?
We'll move.
Moved by Councilmember Moreno, seconded by the chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4 yeas, no nays. Mr. Shai, is there any public comment?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. Next ordinance. Thank you, Ms. Bradstreet. Thank you for your work as well.
Ordinance calendar numbers 33-311, 33-312, to appropriate the balance of fiscal year 2018 Family Recovery Collaborative Grant Funds awarded to the Department of Justice, to the Department of Health, to assist mothers in the New Orleans area with opioid addiction. The award is in the amount of $180,369. We have Ms. Brandy DeLarge from the Department of Health to provide additional information.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Bradstreet. And thank you, Ms. Felton. Ms. DeLarge, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon. I represent the fiscal and administrative side of the New Orleans Health Department. And this is an award we were actually provided in 2018 when our budget was done last year. This balance, the $180,369, was not included with our budget request. And we have been working with the DOJ this year to ensure we can utilize all these funds before the award ends. So we're just seeking to get the remainder of these funds ordinance so we can use them this year.
Congratulations, and I think this is definitely needed assistance, opioid addiction for our, let's assist mothers. How are you all going to do the outreach with our, imagine with our partners like Odyssey?
Yes, we have some, like for example, we have Odyssey. I think we're also working with LSU as well, because it'll be some behavioral issues addressed with these funds also.
Sounds good.
And we actually have our nurse too from LCMC, who we have on another contract that we were originally using just for Healthy Start, but those programs kind of merged together with some of the objectives. So we will also be working with LCMC to implement some of the outcomes for this grant too.
Thank you. Move adoption.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Druso. Mr. Shai, is there any public comment?
No comments on this item.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4 yeas, no nays, and the ordinance is adopted. Moves the full council. Next ordinance.
Ordinance calendar numbers 3313 and 314, to appropriate American Rescue Act grant funds awarded by the Federal Department of Health and Human Services to the New Orleans Department of Health to promote, distribute, administer, and track COVID-19 vaccines. These funds will assist with planning, preparing, and executing other vaccine-related activities necessary to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. Again, we have Ms. Brandy DeLarge from the Health Department to provide additional information.
Go ahead, Brandy.
Okay, so these are funds that are coming through to our healthcare for the homeless program, which runs our clinics here in the city. And as Ms. Felton mentioned, these funds will support our COVID-19 vaccination efforts, along with assisting to provide primary care and behavioral health services to our vulnerable populations. I have Ms. Reagan Collins on the line, who is the executive director of our Healthcare for the Homeless program, should there be specific questions about use of the funds.
Thank you, Mr. Lodge. Mr. Shire, any public comments?
No public comments on this item.
Thank you. It's been moved for adoption, seconded by Councilmember Moreno. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4 yeas, no nays, and the ordinance is adopted. Next ordinance.
Ordinance calendar numbers 33315 and 33316, to appropriate state grant funds to the Office of Homeland Security from the fiscal year 2020 State Homeland Security Program for training and equipment for public safety personnel in relation to disaster and emergencies. Michael Antoine was scheduled to provide additional security from Homeland Security about this program.
Good afternoon, Mr. Antoine.
I see Ross,
Ross Bourgeois.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Fallon. Ross, are you on?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and council members. What this ordinance does is sets up our SHISHP, SHSP, the State Homeland Security Program grants that we get every year from the federal government through the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. And what this particular grant does is allows us to do training and exercises, much like the recent exercise we did for the city assisted evacuation and other training and exercise related events throughout the year.
Thank you. Would move adoption. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. Mr. Shai, is there any public comment?
Councilmember, there are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 4 yeas, no nays. Ordinance is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next ordinance, I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Ordinance calendar numbers 33-317 and 33-318 to transfer funds from the Economic Development Fund to the Mayor's Office of Economic Development to support the city's economic development initiative. We have Jeff Schwartz available for further explanation. If not Jeff, is Mr. Peter Bowen available?
Can everybody hear me? I'm sorry.
Who's that?
Yes, can you all hear me? Council members, I'm sorry. Can you
Is
hear?
that
Okay,
That's
great.
Jeff Schwartz's voice.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes, it's Jeff Schwartz. I'm sorry, I'm on the road, so I'm on the phone. So apologies for any technical difficulties or road noise. Yes, just a brief overview on this, just real quick at the outset. As you all surely are aware, we were not successful in passing an economic development fund millage on the ballot last December 5th. And so there was a fund balance remaining in the fund from last year. And so this ordinance appropriates those funds for the final uses for that millage. The uses go to essential staffing in my office that are funded out of the EDF, some OBES related office build out that will support business activity in the city, and also funds our commitment to the New Orleans Business Alliance for this year. That's the vast majority of the funds that are being appropriated. So I'll be brief. I'll stop there, but happy to answer any questions you all might have.
No questions from the body. Would move adoption. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Jeruso. Mr. Shai, is any public comment?
No, sir, there are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4 yeas, no nays, and the ordinance is adopted and moved to full council. Thank you. Ms. Fountain, thank you. That ends all the ordinances. Thank you also, Mr. Shai. Council members, we're going to defer the budget reports and read any public comments at the June Budget Committee meeting. And
No, council member, there's one more ordinance. It's a capital ordinance. We have Mr. DeLarge.
Which one is this?
It's for the Sewage and Water Board, the Sewage and Water Board funds for DPW capital projects.
All right, we just went through 33, 17, and 18.
We need 33,
Yes, sir.
319.
All right, thank you. All right, sorry about that. Thank you, Ms. Felton and Mr. Large.
Oh, you want me to go ahead? So this is just a capital budget ordinance amendment that appropriates the additional JIR funding for sewage and water boards participation in that program. It also appropriates about 20 million in federal aid dollars that are participation funding for sewage and water board projects. I mean, DPW projects where sewage and water board participates. That's what the ordinance is.
Thank you. A motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Jeruso. Councilmember Banks is not on a budget committee. I'm gonna have the second forum. Mr. Shai, is there any public comment?
No public comments.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4 yeas, no nays, and motion is approved. Ordinance is approved. Thank you, Mr. DeLarge. Thank you, Ms. Felton. As I was saying earlier, we're going to defer the budget reports and read the public comments at the June Budget Committee meeting. And we will post those budget reports to the council's website for personnel, revenue, operating, and the status of the current workforce. Thank you, Mr. Shai. That ends our agenda for today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Jeruso, for having this joint Budget and Public Works Committee meeting.
Thank you.
And of course, our colleagues and members of the public, thank you all. Would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso, seconded by the chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 6 yeas, no nays, and we are adjourned. 5 yeas, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you all.